Okay, welcome to Imposter Syndrome Month. I'm chatting with Nic Pendregaust. Nic, tell us a bit about what you do and we'll go from there.
So I am a therapist. I'm a counsellor, and at the moment I'm really niching down and working with women, if you like, in midlife with midlife therapy. But I'm using my counselling skills, my hypnotherapy skills, and my coaching skills, but really working with women in midlife to look at both cognitive and behavioural strategies that we can use for this very reason, to work with imposter syndrome, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and really having some strategies in our toolkit to do that, as well as looking at the all important stuff like lifestyle modification and what we can do with diet and exercise, but mainly the stuff with the head, how we can manage those real competing thoughts around identity, lacking in confidence, the brain fog. So
and all those things kind of, we sort of put on imposter syndrome as this like umbrella sort of term, but it can bring in all that brain fog, short-term memory problems, overwhelm, stress, so many things kind of layer up to make us feel like we suddenly can't do what we used to be able to do, don't they?
And it's interesting, I wrote a blog yesterday about this. I think for all of us at any time of our life, about 70% of us will experience imposter syndrome. But I think of my own experience, and I think of our experience in midlife. I think when we get into our late 30s, 40s and 50s, there's things that we would have done in our sleep or on autopilot that they feel 10 times harder, and I think that's when we begin to sense that we're losing ourselves, that loss of identity. We can feel quite lonely, quite isolated, and quite frustrated, because things that, as we said, we would do in our sleep just feel harder and maybe cause us more stress, more anxiety. And then, if you like, the self-bullying comes out and say, why can't we do this? And I think that lends itself to feeling like as I call it, a phony, fraud. Why can't I do this? Working with ladies now in sort of professional midlife careers, it's that, I used to be able to go into a meeting and steer a meeting, or I used to be able to get up and present in front of big audiences, but now I'm in that space of, what if this happens? What if that happens? The catastrophizing, I can't do it. The can'ts, or I should be able to do it, and the can'ts come in, and then I think we fall into that space of feeling
Absolutely.
like that we can't cope.
And it's so easy to do, isn't it? Because it only really takes one or two little knocks to the confidence before we start to think that it's all on this catastrophic downward spiral. And then the 3 a.m. little voice comes in and tells us all sorts of bad things. And it's amazing how quickly we can go from blithely sailing through life and getting on with it to a bit of a wreck and not really knowing what on earth happened.
And I think there's also something about, as we are going through perimenopause, menopause, and it's also recognizing that our energy level might not be there as it used to be sort of 5, 10, 15 years ago. So if you like, we need to understand that we need more in the tank to maybe do that presentation, steer that meeting, facilitate, whatever it looks like.
That's
when the self-care is so important, so that we've got the energy
so
to do it.
What would you advise people to, like, really simple things that people can do to boost themselves up, to avoid being kind of consumed by this? What would be the little things that you can, things that people can just take away from this as nice, easy things to do now, kind of thing?
So there's a few things that I would say. I think the big is to notice what we're telling ourselves. So as you said in 3M, just tuning in and listening to that critical voice, chimp on the shoulder, inner caveman, whatever we like, you know, to call it. And I think sometimes I said, instead of wrestling with our feelings, you know, I know it's easier said than done, but to allow them to come up and to experience them and to notice them. And I often talk about befriending them. So rather than seeing them as a bully, really being curious as to what they're telling us. So I always talk about our emotions are messengers.
Yes.
So if we're feeling things and things are feeling difficult, stressful, you know, what is that telling us? And what do we do differently to step out of that space, whether it's self-care, whatever it is, but to listen, to play detective, to say, what can I do differently? And the small win is actually changing our language. So it's those good old affirmations again that says, you know, thinking back and not comparing. We don't want the comparison-itis, as I call it, with somebody else in the office. You know, it's comparing ourselves to where we were 3 months, 6 months ago and thinking about our achievements. And it's the language, it's what we're telling ourselves, you know, I can do this, I am good enough, I am worthy, I am confident. And I know I've spoken on previous videos as well about these, what I call these weird power poses. There's a great TED talk by Amy Cuddy on it. You know, it is about, you know, if you're going into a meeting or you're facilitating, you know, go into the loo, go into the bathroom, hands on hips, look in the mirror, you know, just shifting that kind of body language. We don't want to be going into something like this.
No.
You know, want to be opening up our body language, Wonder Woman, hands on hips, however you want to do it. So you're feeling into it, you know.
Yeah.
And if you want to use that mirror to kind of reiterate those kind of affirmations. So language and body language is really, really, really key. The other thing I think a real quick win is if we are comparing ourselves, you know, oh, well, Jane in the office, she could be going through this. I think she's going through this perimenopausal lark. How does she seemingly have it together? Well, probably Jane doesn't seemingly have it all together. So I think, again, it goes back to the simple wins of how do we surround ourselves with people like us? Not that they can be toxic relationships that we get into the comparison-itis and lowering the energy and feeling the victim. But if we're surrounded by people that are also experiencing perimenopausal symptoms that can support us, like our cheerleaders, our sort of team besties, you know, it's like the hugs principle, isn't it? We've got people around us that can support us, and we can support each other and go on that journey together. So I'm saying ditch the comparison, but look around to see who's around us.
And I think that ditching the comparison is so important, because we all do it, and we look around and we go, oh, everyone else has got everything together and I'm just winging it. Not at all. Everyone's winging it.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, some people might present themselves slightly better, but there are things they're still winging it. Nobody has got it completely sorted, I've learned.
Yeah, and I think that can help us to sort of change the energy and take us out that space of feeling the imposter, you know, feeling the victim. It's just me that, as you said, Emily, doesn't have it, you know, together, because, you know, you can bet your bottom dollar, yeah, there'll be other people. The other thing I talk about is journaling, you know, writing it down. Write down what you're good at, your strengths, your achievements. Again, even if it's a daily basis, you know, to say, what have I kind of achieved today, you know, and when you do momentarily, of course, of that comparison with what the inner critic is saying, what you've actually done and what you've got written down on paper, they'll be poles apart in the sense of saying, well, actually, I had a really good day today because I achieved this, I did that, you know, whatever it might be, relative to the inner critic that could be banging on saying, well, you haven't done this, you've still got to do that. So I always say, get things out of your head, get them down, you know, on paper. Doesn't need to be an essay, you know, it doesn't have to be a chapter. It could just be words, thoughts, feelings, emotions, to say, yeah, or yeah, I've done this.
Absolutely.
Whatever the affirmations are that ring true.
And I think, just going back to one thing that you said about being curious, being curious about the language we're using to ourselves and actually being curious about it, because I think a lot of us have that 3 a.m. thing that goes, oh, you're rubbish at this and you're useless at that, and you're da 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 da. And we just let it kind of wash over us, and we just believe it because it's been saying it for such a long time. But actually being curious around that and going, where's the evidence for that?
Yeah. And I think recognizing too, which just reminded me, is that, you know, how we need to check in and be curious about the evidence. But if we don't do that, how they become self-limiting, you know, beliefs. And then the curiosity, you know, where has this come from? Why do I go to a space? You know, some of us are a cup half full, aren't we? And some a cup half empty. But why do I go to this space? And sometimes that could be about because we've heard it from others. We've heard it in childhood. We've heard it from our parents. This is not to guilt or shame our parents in any way, but, you know, things that we've, you know, we've kind of picked up on, you know.
Yes, I mean,
kind of frame that when we're feeling like an imposter, well, I'm feeling like an imposter because I don't feel like I'm working hard enough, because we've heard it from childhood that, you know, you work hard first and then you go out to play. You know, all these things, they have such a bearing, but be curious that, as you said, where's the evidence? Who's that come from? Does it come from me? Or has it potentially come from somebody else and it's got stuck and it's got lodged? And then sort of frames are, as I call it, the negative chit-chat.
Absolutely. And I think that's, sometimes it can be quite hard to identify where those kind of root things have come from. And that's where things like hypnotherapy can be so useful, can't they?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, therapy itself, talking therapy, to say, okay, I'm stuck here with this belief. And again, being curious, okay, where's it come from? Because we can again, sort of with that negative chit chat, the thoughts can really bully us into submission. But if we can understand where they've come from and say, well, actually, I might have heard that from, I don't know, friends, mum, you know, but actually, that's not mine. I'm choosing no longer to own that. That didn't come from me. I've held on to it, but actually, can I let that go? It's not my stuff, and that can help, you know, alleviate our sort of pressure cooker, those 3 a.m. thoughts, or the ticker tape, as I like to call it, that's going around, you know, in our.
This is all stuff that you can help people with, isn't it? And you work one-to-one, online and in person, presumably.
I do, absolutely. So West Kent, I'm working in Sevenoaks and Tunbridge, and one-to-one, you know, online. And if anybody's in this neck of the woods, I also offer walk and talk therapy as well, which is different again, because we can get out in nature, we can do some exercise. But yeah, it's kind of aware, you know, of particularly imposter syndrome we're talking about today, how it comes up and how it can really, with the hormones as well, it can exacerbate those feelings of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, you know. And I think identity, just on that final note, I think identity is a big piece. You know, it can really play mind games with, who am I? Who do I want to be? You know, do I, you know, those feelings, do I fit in here? Do I want something different? You know, do I want to be in this career? Do I want to do a different career? So yeah, identity is a big thing too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nic.
Yeah, lovely to talk to you as always.